Because if that was your attempt to recreate that meme, then that's an epic. No, I'm not letting this go. Is this meant to be the girlfriend meme or not? Because I cannot understand what you were doing with this unless it's like a reinterpretation of that whole, like, implying like, was I looking at her ass and then you've seen me looking at her ass and now you're mad at me? What is going on with this thumbnail?
This is the first time you've got one of my niche cultural references. Like the one that you finally get. Last week I did the "This is fine" with all the fire. And
I got that.
Oh, yeah. No, I got that to tell you about it. I had to send you the original meme and you went...
You sent me the original meme, at which point I went, oh, I didn't feel the need to tell you that I understood the meme because I thought it was really freaking obvious. This one's really obtuse. I had to dig deep in my soul to correctly interpret what the hell was going on with this one.
I am playing the YouTube thumbnail game. I am just trying to see what works. Guys, I won't have to do so much with the thumbnails if you would just bloody share the show. So if you haven't, please tell everyone about the show and make my job easier, please.
All right. So a couple of things. We have a really, 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 really important and exciting announcement, which I do have here. If you give me a moment, I'm going to share a screen. I'm going to share this screen, click share.
Waiting.
And for some reason, I still have to click share again. The Oddcast live show, the first birthday, it is booked in. It is happening on the 21st of February this year. About a month and a half after our actual first birthday. But you know what? We're going to let that slide. The location is really, really cool. And we're not telling you what it is. When you book the tickets, in the confirmation, you'll get the location. It's in kind of the inner Bayside eastern suburbs of Melbourne.
Hopefully you guys understand why we have to do that.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate reality. As discussed, we bumped up the budget a little bit because we told you guys about the trouble we were having getting a place for, sort of $20 entry tickets. We were losing money everywhere we looked. So Carl's found a place and we have bumped the entry up to $49, but that includes your food, a decent suite of canapes. So not like a full-on lunch, but a decent suite of canapes. And then you buy your own drinks at bar prices. And don't miss it. Because honestly, I'll be doing my first ever stand-up comedy, and
are you ready?
That is one for that's going to be one for the ages. I tell you, I'm going to be right alongside Ricky Gervais instantly, first time out of the gate. I promise you.
I'm excited for this because it's like, I know everyone's handles, and it's going to be one of those things where people go, "Oh, Carlz, hi, nice to meet you," and I'll be like, "Hi, Mark," and they're like, "Oh, my name is like blah blah," and I'm like, "Oh, yeah. Thank you."
Jizz Magnet 6969. Oh, that's you. Yeah, right.
That happened actually. Like some of the Oddies came to my exhibition, my Chimera exhibition. Yeah. They're like, "Hey, how you going?" And we're wearing Oddie merch, and I feel so rude because I don't know anyone's name. I'm like, "Hey, guy, hi, thank you," and then I'm like, "Yeah, I don't need to introduce myself, obviously, because that's weird." So I'm like waiting for them to be like, "My name's Joe."
Yeah. Yeah. Help us out, guys. Help us out. I recognize that you guys see our faces every day. We don't see yours, but we do love you and we appreciate you. So do help us out. Give us your name.
Comment here from Melissa. Is it near a train station? It is right next to a major train station. It is on the Sandringham line.
Carly has thought of everything. It's a good venue.
It is at lunchtime, so you've got time to do stuff with the kids in the morning. You can get there at lunchtime, and then you can be out of there in the afternoon and go home and enjoy the rest of your weekend. So I have thought everything through as much as I could.
Yep. And we will be doing a full episode of the Oddcast, so it'll be an unusual time for an episode. Carly, one thing we haven't discussed, so let's just talk privately amongst ourselves for a minute. Everyone just stop your ears for a second. Is this going to be an extra episode? Or are we like not doing one of the other ones in the week before or the after, or the week after?
I don't know. How much Carlz and Topher do people need or want? What's the demand?
Yeah, well, that is a good question. That is a good question because like it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to do a heap of like crowd interactions. There'll be a couple of giveaways. There'll be my stand-up. There'll be a bunch of stuff that we kind of can't normally do in an Oddcast. So I reckon we just do it as an extra show. I reckon we just like bonus.
The date, guys, is the 21st of February, 3 weeks away. No, it's not 3 weeks away. What am I talking about? It's about a month away. Getting ahead of myself.
About a month away.
Yeah.
You need time to go to Japan and back before we do this.
I do.
So 21st of February 2026. I saw someone in the comments say that the location is not listed in the confirmation email. So I presume, Carly, in that case, we're going to send out a location confirmation to all ticket holders before the event.
Yep. I hope you guys understand, like, it's a safety and security measure. Obviously, we're going to tell you where it is. So just be patient with us. We'll tell you a little bit closer to the date. We're just trying to, mitigate any potential problems. And you know what these things are like. You'll get agitators, you'll get people who infiltrate. We don't want that. We're hoping the price is enough of a deterrent. But I will say this, just so you guys know, when I was finding venues and, they're like, who are you? What are you doing? And I have to tell them it's a podcast. They then, as soon as I say we're a podcast, they're like, which podcast? And then, of course, it's political. And I was interrogated. Who are you? What do you do? What do you talk about? What kind of politics? I had to basically confirm that I wasn't a neo-Nazi. So just be kind to me, because this took a lot to get off the ground.
Yeah, there's a reason for the delays and so forth. So it's been a lot of work, but we are going to have a lot of fun. It's going to be an absolutely awesome afternoon. And not only are you going to get to catch up with us and see a show get made right in front of you and do a whole bunch of interactive stuff while we're there, you're also going to meet each other. And I actually reckon that's going to be just as awesome. I mean, it can't get much more awesome than meeting me, obviously, but almost as awesome is going to be not meeting Carly, meeting each other, meeting all the other oddies, like-minded people.
What if people meet their significant other? What if they come to the Oddcast first show and they're like, we're playing Cupid?
What if you fall in love with someone other than me? I mean, it's miracles do happen. Miracles do happen.
Have you started your stand-up thing? Is it all planned?
No, I've been working on it. I'm pretty happy. It's going to upset a few people, but it wouldn't be funny if it didn't. It might be my first and last. I don't know.
What if you bomb? What if everyone's
like, all right. So I've had to think about that, because that is a real possibility. Like, I'm not magical. I can't guarantee it. I have done a lot of emceeing over the years, which means that I have a lot of time. An MC doesn't have to be a comedian. That is a different thing. Like when you say, hey, I'm a comedian, it's like, be funny or else, right? There's a different kind of attitude and relationship. So I think we just need to schedule my stand-up segment in like the last hour of the show so that everybody's drunk enough to find me funny. That's sort of that's my defense mechanism, number one. Number two, I have done a lot of MCing, and I've dropped a couple of pretty good funnies along the way as an MC. So I reckon I'm not going to bomb, but beyond that, it's anybody's guess. I will admit I'm more nervous about it than I thought I was going to be.
Yeah, that's normal. If you weren't nervous, I'd say you're not trying hard enough, or you're not pushing hard enough. Man.
Probably. All right, Pro Engineer was first comment. I went back and double checked, and he was quite correct. He says, woo, and then he says matching tats. He's referring to the tattoos on the thumbnail, Carly. So someone appreciated your handiwork there. I can't quite figure out
the little details.
Yeah. Well, he didn't get the reference, though, because he says, I can't quite figure out what Carlz is mad at, though. Topher looks intrigued. I got the reference. Pro Engineer, I hope that our little conversation earlier helped you out with that one. Lisa Sleep 520, thank you very much for the super chat. That's very, very kind and a great way for us to kick off the show. No comment or question, so I kind of normally, if you give us that, we'll sort of have a good chat about whatever it is that you've brought up. But thank you, really appreciate the support. And Ricky Hammer, I'll have to see if Boss Man will let me stay down in Melbourne in my truck for an extra day. Definitely try and make that happen, Ricky, because it'll be well worth it. That afternoon's going to be a lot of fun.
Can I start the show off with just something that I thought would be really funny? Because something that we've been talking about regularly is what is going on with women, right? We've been talking about this. We've been talking about woke women, and I know we try and keep this as Australian as possible. I'm just taking my bracelets off so I don't bang them around on the table. We try and keep it Australian-centric, but obviously anyone that's watching what's going on in the States right now with ICE and all the protests.
Oh, yeah.
Keep on, I see it on Instagram, I see it on YouTube, I see it on X, is like all of this footage of these women who are so far out of their minds, just screaming, going crazy. And, I'm going to play devil's advocate because, it is easy to make fun of these people. Of course it is, because it's so outrageous. What do you say? Like when you see people just screeching and shaving and saying absolutely ridiculous things. But there's part of me, like, I mean, obviously I'm a woman, just so you know. Hang on. Oh,
Wait, sorry, what? I thought I was being a misogynist pig and doing a podcast with another bloke.
Yeah, that's it.
How dare you? I've been catfished. I've been catfished, I tell you.
Isn't it funny when a woman infiltrates the podcast space, but it's not the wrong kind of woman? Have you noticed that? It's like, oh, we want a woman, not that one.
Not that one. Not that one. Yeah.
But, you know, I've been thinking about this and I want to write a video on it. And I've stumbled upon a new idea, but, you know, this is still marinating in my brain. There's a new sort of, I'm going to call it a renaissance of the female archetype. If we look back to the Middle Ages and we look back to the actual Renaissance, we had.
You mean when you were a kid?
Yes, back in my youth.
You did just turn 40. I'm allowed to do that to you now.
I'm actually old. I get to be cranky. This is fantastic.
This is verifiably true. Carly is old.
I am a cranky old 40-year-old woman. I'm middle-aged.
And no kids. I get to call you a spinster. Oh, yes, I can call you I have someone in my life I can call a spinster. That's excellent.
Because I'm not single.
Why not?
The spinster's single.
Oh, you're not married though. You're not married by the standards of the day when the word spinster was kind of in the culture. I'm gonna use it. I'm gonna do it. I'm giving myself permission.
Well, it's funny you say spinster because this is something I'm quite fascinated on. You know how people like, oh, you can't stereotype people, that's racist or bigoted or whatever.
Right.
Humans have to stereotype. That's kind of how we do. We have to put people in pigeonholes. And like I said, you go back to the Renaissance period, go back to the Middle Ages, you look at the way we talked about women and particularly documented women, right? You had the hysterical woman, that's more 1800s, 1700s. You had the witch, the woman that wasn't conforming, therefore she was a witch. You had the spinster, all of these kinds of things, right? You had the princess.
Yep.
Now we're seeing a new version of archetypes emerge, and none of them get along. But I think you could attribute this to a curve. Now, kind of like the whole hot and crazy spectrum. Are you familiar with this? The hotter someone is, the crazier they are. You can't want someone in the middle.
No. The crazier you will allow them to be, the crazier you will put up with.
Yeah, true. The hotter they are, usually the more crazy.
From How I Met Your Mother was how it got popularized. I don't know if that's where it originated, but that's where it was popularized.
Yeah, I think Barney said it. Anyway. Yeah. I would argue these new archetypes do exactly this. So at the top of that curve, the crazy curve, you would have the progressive, right? The gender non-conforming, non-binary, septum piercing, blue hair stereotype. And obviously I'm stereotyping to be to make it really clear for you guys. And then under that, you have the leftist. And what the differentiator between those two is, the leftist hasn't quite conformed to the uglification of women. You know, they don't have the shaved head or the colorful head or the crazy piercings, but they'll wear the rainbow lanyard. They'll have pronouns in their bio, but by all
the symbols.
Yeah, they still look like, you know, a woman because they're kind of sitting the fence, right? And then you keep coming down. There's a few of them, but you would have like the nonconformist, which is me, someone who doesn't like being pigeonholed. And then you keep going down to like trad wife. You'd have the girl boss, you'd have the fitness influencer, the OnlyFans girl, these archetypes. And what you have, if you put them on a thing, is just how crazy they've gone and how like kind of captured by their emotions. And I also wonder if you could directly pinpoint on there the uptake on SSRIs, the uptake of ADHD, self-diagnosed kind of mental health things. And then also the way they participate in traditional culture. And then, like I said, this is just something I'm like sort of building out now. But going and having a look at these ICE women, they fall into two categories. You have your progressive leftists, or you have, I should say, your ultra progressive, and then you have your leftists. These women, I would dare say, fit into those two categories. And if you look at the way they're so unregulated with their emotions, they're mostly unmarried, or if they have children, they've abandoned them. Like the Renee Good one's really fascinating. We haven't talked about this on the podcast yet, have we?
No, we haven't. It's been on my mind.
So I'm not going to comment either way about the shooting. Everyone's had their say on that. I think a loss of anyone's life is terrible. I don't think we want to be killing. And I'm like, just as a side note, I'm particularly like fed up with just seeing death on my Instagram or my ex. It's become really bizarre how quickly we'll send a video of someone literally being either shot, killed, murdered.
End of their life.
And that's the moment someone's life is taken from them. And we're just so desensitized to it. Like whether it was Charlie Kirk or that poor girl on the bus or Renee Good, like anyone's death to me is like, I don't know if we should be broadcasting that so nonchalantly.
So readily.
But with Renee Good, right? So obviously straight away, polarized, straight away, everyone had their narrative, off it goes. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, the left obviously are calling this state-sanctioned murder. And the right are saying, like, you know, she was shot because she was impeding federal law enforcement. Either way,
or more specifically, because she drove in a way that that a law enforcement officer might have felt was threatening.
Yeah, exactly. But what's fascinating about this is how quickly that narrative needs to be shaped. So she's a woman, right? All of a sudden, the left know what a woman is, right? Up until that point, we don't know what a woman is. But when the woman suits the narrative, then we're definitely going to talk about it being a woman. And she was a mother. Now, what is the one thing the left had demonized the last 20 years?
Oh, yeah, motherhood.
Right? Motherhood, wanting to look after their children. Yet when it's politically convenient, all of a sudden Renee Good is painted as a mother because she has a child. Who thinks about this? That child so she had two, I think, and only one of them was in her care. One of them was living with the father because the new, I'm going to call her a wife. They weren't actually married. Renee's new partner, a butch lesbian, enjoyed putting out her cigarettes on Renee's children. That conveniently gets left out of the story. If you go and have a look at Renee Good's criminal record, there is child abuse charges, and there was a what do you call it? Like when the child's taken away.
Yeah, like a child protective services kind of intervention.
Yeah, because the woman who was also at the protest put her cigarettes out on Renee's children. So I just find it really interesting how these female archetypes are being weaponized in the media. And like I said, I don't quite know how to articulate this yet, but I actually think this is kind of the crux of what's going on. Somehow women's natural empathy has been weaponized. And I think there is no clear example of this than what I'm about to play. So I thought this just embodies everything that I've just said. Let me just pull this for you. We can all enjoy this together. So I'm just going to.
I think the word enjoy was in air quotes. What? Carly, 2 girls, 1 cup was a stretch. All right. This. What?
Guys,
what point do they think they're making? What's like in their minds? What is this about?
This is how I got onto this whole archetype thing. I'm like, what happens to a woman where she starts to behave in the masculine in a way that's so ridiculous and obscene, but it feels justified? And I honestly, the only answer I can come up with is that when you have weaponized that empathy to a point, there's nowhere else to turn to. All of that internalized maternal instinct has to come out somewhere, right? They don't have kids. They don't have a partner. So it's coming out on the social justice issue. So whether it's trans rights, Black Lives Matter, or now it's the migrants and the ICE crime, the federal ICE agents.
Yeah, ICE agents, yeah.
Gone traditionally to family or their partner, children, is now coming out, this like mother bear, ultra protective thing around the social justice issue. And I think it's these women stark, crazy, mad. Like, what do you think?
So I saw some research recently that says that now 25% of adult women have a diagnosed mental health condition and they're on some kind of a medication, which is absolutely terrifying when you realize that means that 75% of you are running around without your medication. Okay, that's the bit that's really scary to me. All right, but no. There is a loss of purpose. I mean, we hear a lot more commentary around young men and the loss of purpose in young men. Of course, that's what Jordan Peterson was trying to speak to. But this is what was that TV show that we're all meant to be outraged by, that was about radicalization? A UK kid, I think it was, got radicalized online in his TV. Adolescence, all right? And we're all supposed to be terrified about young men without purpose and meaning getting radicalized, blah, blah, blah. What about the women without purpose and meaning who have been, hell yeah, radicalized in a completely different direction? But this is not normal. This is not healthy. This is not constructive. This doesn't, even if they get what they want, it doesn't lead to a better world. They are literally tearing down with their own hands. And that's easier. And it appeals to a darker part of ourselves. We all sort of have that, but most of us harness our drive to build, to create, to make the world better. And we reserve the destructive side of ourselves either for our imaginations or for those rare occasions where it's really called for. But there's this level of adolescence, to pick up the word of that show, that remains in so many people now. And we talked about people being able to be children well into their adult years, I think last episode.
Yeah.
And one of the expressions of that is that they bow to their desire to destroy and to tear down. And that's so much of what we see in the feminist movement. It's really, really clear. But also, I would say, in the darker and worse ends of your misogynistic kind of movement, which does exist. It is real. It gets overblown, but it is real. There is this desire in no longer to become better and to transcend, if I can steal the Jordan Peterson word, to transcend yourself, but simply a desire to tear down the other so that you look better in comparison.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Obviously I studied beauty standards last year, right? Like, you guys haven't drunk for a while. Masters, haha, there you go.
Oh, no, hang on, stop. We need to add archetype as a drinking word. Because I thought you were only using that in relation to your tarot card deck and your masters, but it turns out I think that word's with us. I think we're stuck with that word for a long time yet. You've used it, yeah. You used it a half a dozen times already this episode.
It's a descriptive word. It's what you call it. What else would I call it?
Everybody, brace your livers. Archetype is now on the list.
Okay. Well, that is what my next exhibition is going to be about. It's about female archetypes. Anyway. So, during my research around beauty standards, it relates to everything. The way women self-surveil and also laterally surveil each other, right? So what I think is, and it's interesting because, I get to talk about this because I am a woman and, they can come for me all they like, but I've been part of this behavior. I've been surveilled and I've had people, come after me, and it's usually women. There's no one that hates a woman more than a feminist. And when I'm observing this, I think what it is, when you talk about radicalization, women naturally hang out in groups, right? Like, women like to be around their peers. It's a tribal thing. We did that when you're all together and hunting. We're very social, and we're very much maternal in that way. So given that we're in the middle of like a loneliness epidemic, for men, the loneliness is that they're single and they're on their own. For women, I think they're in these circles with people that they don't particularly like. So there's no real rapport. There's no real relationship. It's just a commonality of ideological means. So, for example, it sounds like the right thing to be part of this, anti-ICE parade, but they're around other people they have nothing in common with, no actual relationships. They're just ideologically bound. Therefore, they're lonely in that. Does that make sense?
Yes. Now, I'm looking up a famous movie quote because I can't remember where it's from. I'm just literally Googling it now. We buy things we don't need with money. It's in Fight Club. Okay. No, it's not in Fight Club. Hang on. We buy things we don't need with. Sorry?
You buy things we don't need to impress people we don't know.
Yeah, we buy things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like. Yes. And I can see it it's attributed to a million different people. Maybe it was in Fight Club, but it's attributed to a lot of different people. And that popped into my head as you were talking about this lateral surveillance and these sort of the ladies sort of social groups where you're not in those groups necessarily because you like those people. You're in those groups. This is how it looks to me as I look in from the outside. You're in those groups because you've picked the people that you're going to compete with and try and keep up with. And when you get to a girls' get together and you see that, Shirley's put on weight and Candace is going through a breakup and, blah, blah, blah. Like you want to feel better about yourself, but it's better in comparison to that group.
Which is why, and I actually talk about this in my thesis, it's why a very attractive woman will always have the short and stout best friend every single time.
Because you need the fridge to protect the snacks, right? That's why when they go to the club, That's why they have that. They've all got that friend.
No comment. I did a post today, actually. That was what was playing when I logged on before. And it was around a picture I saw of an influencer, right? And this influencer was particularly skinny. And I just thought this was fascinating because why else would a woman post a photo on social media? It's because they want validation. Whether or not it's a polarizing photo, whether or not they get good or bad attention, attention is the most valuable commodity we have today. And it's so interesting because I think this is a real left thing because they've become so ideologically captured. There's this really binary thinking that they must adhere to, even though they hate binaries. And the second you detour out of it, it's cataclysmic to them. They cannot possibly conceive nuance in these situations. So I'll give you an example. It was a photo of this very thin woman in a bikini. And the commentary under it was like, basically, she's too skinny. As a mother, that's dangerous, yada, yada, yada. Women talking women shit. But at the core of that, these are the same women who will say, you know, beauty standards are patriarchy. It's men's fault that we're doing this. The reason I brought this up is that, you know, this culture war is predominantly led by women, and it's women enforcing it on other women. And I think men, for the most part, they're not allowed to say anything because they're sure, like, you know, there'll be misogynists. But if you look at what's going on, and this brings me to the next thing I want to talk about, in Amsterdam, some of you guys may be across this, it wasn't meant to be a social experiment. It was meant to be a showcase
integration
of diversity. Do you want to fill people in while I pull it up?
Oh, look, I only know the very highest level stuff, but before we get to that, we've got over 600 people watching. I want to bring this back up before we get to some darker topics. Guys, the birthday party is on, and you need to buy your tickets because they're already selling fast, and there are only 200 of them. I have dropped the link into the comments a few times, but if you go to topherfield.com, go to the shop, go to all the products, you'll find the Oddcast live show ticket. Tickets are $49. That covers entry, but it also covers all your canapes and sort of your light snacks. If you want to buy a meal, that's a separate thing, but there will be finger food and so forth included in the ticket. Drinks are at bar prices. We can't afford to pay for your drinks, guys. We know what you're like. $49. It is on the 21st of the 2nd, 21st of April, 2026. And you need to get your tickets because they're already starting to move now. The email's just gone out. It's going to go up on the Discord for all the hardcore oddies. We've got 600 people watching now. We're going to end up with over 1,000 people watching by the end of the show. And honestly, just 100 people buying 2 tickets each, and we're sold out. It's gone. So, head over to topherfield.com. Yeah?
I cannot add more people, unfortunately. 200 is the maximum capacity of venue.
That's the venue. And we looked at bigger venues, and it just made it exponentially harder to find a place with a bar in the room, with the parking, with all that stuff. So, guys, it'll be in the Bayside inner east suburbs of Melbourne. We're not releasing the exact location till closer to the date, but it is on the 21st of the 2nd, 2026, 100% confirmed, 200 tickets only. It's going to be a fantastic night. So guys, get in there. I think we're approaching 10% sold out, and we literally just announced it, 28 minutes ago. So get in there while you can. All right.
Bring it back. Scroll up. Thank you. Can we appreciate the artwork? Come on.
It's awesome. It's awesome. Yeah.
On the car, the Delorian.
Beautiful retro. So can we talk through some of the references in here, because it's not just all one thing, is it? The DeLorean's obvious, Back to the Future. The sun. Where did you get the sun and the concept of the color scheme from?
It's Miami Vice. So this is about retro and just nostalgia for a period when the world felt a little bit more sane. That's where it sort of came from.
And I'm going to say, deliberate or not, all the stars and things just bring a little element of Star Wars nostalgia in there as well. I'm just going to throw that in there, whether you meant for it to be or not. You know what I get out of this? I get California Games. You remember the like really early or relatively early computer game, the California Games had the music playing and you do like the surfboard and whatever. That sun, I reckon California Games had like the stripy sun, but the stripes got thicker as it went down. There's something in that artwork that makes me think California Games. It's just really warm and fuzzy. I really like it.
It was meant to be nostalgia.
Shame about these 2 hideous people in the middle. But besides that, I think it's really lovely.
Yeah, I just thought it'd be fun. You got to have some fun with this stuff, and I get to indulge my like inner child whenever I do this stuff. But anyway, back to more serious stuff. Did you see this graph? This is doing the rounds. This has gone around a few times now.
Okay, so hang on. Are we moving on to the Amsterdam thing, or are we still on this?
We're going towards it. We're edging towards it now.
Yeah, the partisan gap between young men and young women almost doubled in the past 25 years. I am across this, not necessarily in depth with the research, but I'm aware of what the research says.
So basically, if you look at this graph, right, so it was relatively normal and it ebbed and flowed about the same time. So at around 2000, I'm going to say 2006, it became quite close. You can see there. And then it widened again. It seemed pretty similar the whole way through. And then around 2015, you can see things start to go quite left. And then all of a sudden, like from 2020, it goes super far left. Now, keep in mind what was unfolding at that point. So 2005, 2006 is social media, right? So Facebook, I think it went global around 2006, 2007. And then as we follow across, Instagram, mass adaptation was around 2011, 2012. And then obviously you have TikTok and everything around 2019. And then you have COVID. So I don't know. I mean, it's one contributor. I would dare say a lot of this has to do with social media and this like collective tribalism that's been globalized by the fact that we now have access to people we wouldn't normally have access to. Yeah. And I think most people live most of their social life on the internet now, particularly women. Yeah. And so you see this, I think it's, women again enforcing the same shit on other women. And whether or not this is what I find really interesting, because when you have a one-on-one with a leftist, right? Yeah. They don't go this crazy. When you have a discussion with a leftist or in their group around proximity to other people, that's when they go really, really hyperbolic. Yeah. And I think a lot of this has to do with echo chambers and hive minds. And
it's performance art. There's an element of performance art as well. That's why the behavior changes in front of the others.
Yeah, absolutely. And remember, as this graph's going up, you think of how many women are now in leadership positions, whether it's as CEOs or as MPs, through the whole DEI age, we've had a lot of women break glass ceilings. Now, as a woman, of course I want to see that. I want to see that, the sky's the limit for all of us. But I've always been someone that is a big supporter of meritocracy. If you're the best person for the job, fucking yeah, let's get it.
Get the job.
Man or woman, don't care. I just want you to be the best. But now with that, I want to contrast this story in Amsterdam. Let me pull it up.
Can we go back to that graphic for one more second? I want to make one more comment on that. Because the way that the women stat has retracted since the height of the COVID panic mirrors another story that we're going to be talking about soon, which is the support for Australia Day amongst younger people in Australia, and mirrors so much of what we're seeing about the retraction of wokeness. Now, the question for me, and of course, none of us can know this at this time, but it's worth watching how this develops. How far down is that line going to come? Obviously, the trend has flattened out, shallowed out slightly, but it's still very much a downward trend. How far is that going to go? Are we going to be able to see in this graph as well that generational shift that I think we're seeing in so many other areas? And we won't know until we have another 5 years worth of data, but I think it's just worth sort of logging that thought.
Yeah, it's good to look at this stuff, even though it's not necessarily everywhere and all of a sudden woke's dead and the world's healing. Yeah. We can see that the trend is shifting, right? Like I think 100%. There's a level. I think I've said this on the podcast 1,000 times, but surely these people are tired. How do you maintain this outrage? I mean, you think of all of the different social justice issues that have popped up over the last few years since COVID, particularly, and how these movements are so orchestrated. It's like the thing happens and the slogan's already ready to go. Like, I kid you not.
The signs are already printed. That's what it looks like.
That's crazy. Yeah. So, for example, the Renee Good thing happened, I think, on a Saturday or Sunday. The Golden Globes were on Thursday, and they already had badges and banners saying "Be good" and like the conspiracy theorist in me is like, I'm like, hang on a minute, is this planned? Is this orchestrated? I don't know.
That's too quick. No, they're just that quick to jump on the virtue.
Yeah. And I think what they're so used to weaponizing any sort of situation like this, they're like, great, this is another one for our movement. We need to use this. Let's add this in. But I want to show you the cost of woke women, right?
This one's dark, everybody. I'm sorry, it has to be talked about, but this is pretty dark.
Yeah, so I'm just going to bring up there's a couple of what do you call it, news articles. Oh, maybe not that one, sorry. Of course, it's very hard to find this on proper mainstream. So whether you guys think this is a questionable source or not, the story is real. But this is The Sun from the UK, which I know is a tabloid. But very few, the ABC is not going to report on this because it would go against everything they talk about. So when I say experiment, it wasn't planned to be an experiment. It was just meant to be a new way of doing social housing. So this is in Amsterdam, and what it was a combination of 125 students and 125 asylum seekers. So a total of 125 refugees were housed alongside 125 Dutch students at a housing block in Amsterdam. And the idea was sold as pioneering a form of housing to solve the property shortage in 2016, and it was rolled out 2 years later. Things quickly turned sour as students shared horrific details of sexual assaults, harassment, violence, and stalking with the Dutch investigative documentary program. Former residents have filed over 20 reports of sexual assault and violence in the past 18 months alone. These offences are alleged to have taken place as early as 2020. In one shocking case, a woman said she was raped by a Syrian refugee who invited her into his room to watch a film in 2019. The woman, only identified as Amanda, said he wanted to learn Dutch to get an education and she wanted to help him. So there is your suicidal empathy. Yeah. Amanda said that the man asked her to come into the room repeatedly until she agreed. And once inside the room, she said he made her uncomfortable and she asked to leave, but he refused and trapped her in the room and then carried out the assault. She filed a police report, but was told there was not enough evidence to make the case. When have we heard that before? Mm-hmm. Just months later, another woman living in the complex raised fears about the Syrian to the Managing Housing Association. She believed women living in the block, including herself, were in danger. But the local authorities said it would be impossible to evict the man. And in 2024, a former resident, Mohammed, was convicted of 2 counts of rape, one against Amanda and another against a separate female resident. Drug trafficking was reported, fights broke out, and the Housing Association suspected a gang rape had taken place in one of the studios. A lawyer for one of the victims said that the fact that the suspect was able to continue living there for so long is truly reprehensible because many women ran the risk of being raped in the safety of their own homes. Other employees were also allegedly threatened. The housing corporation considered shutting it down, but when speaking to the documentary, they said they were completely overwhelmed and they no longer wanted responsibility for the safety of the complex. The municipality refused to terminate the housing project, and you can assume why. It wouldn't look very good, would it? So, no, this is an isolated thing. This happened in Amsterdam. The Dutch are incredibly, incredibly woke, and this is just another example of this great idea of diversity and inclusion, and having empathy above all else. And who suffers from this, Topher? Who suffers from it? Women.
Can I correct something that you said there? You said this is an isolated thing. That particular exact example is an isolated thing. That's the only one of those that I'm aware of. But the problem is not an isolated thing. We've talked at length before about London, but this is happening right across Europe. We know about Sweden and some of the horrific problems there. What's not isolated is women who are victims of horrific crimes being ignored, being disregarded, even in the era of Believe All Women, being completely sidelined by authorities who would have taken a very different approach had the accused been a white male. Had the accused been any one of a number of other demographics or nationalities, the police would have taken a very different approach. And this is the problem that I've talked about before at length. We've got to treat people as individuals. When there is an accusation against an individual, we have to take that seriously. And if we fail to take that seriously because we're afraid of upsetting the group, then we are guilty of racism in its lowest and most base form. We're saying, no, the group identity that you have is going to protect you from your individual crimes. And exactly like you said, it is often the women that suffer.
And another story, I think I brought this up before. This is another example of a deeply empathetic DEI woman, very woke. She was a mayor of a German, she was a German mayor, and she was stabbed by her own adopted children who happened to be African migrants.
Yeah.
And even though she did everything right and gave them a good upbringing, they still turned on her, right? So I actually haven't followed this up. I don't know whether she passed away or not.
Yeah,
But
I don't know the result.
It's just another example of how when you are so ideologically captured, you are going to make terrible decisions like this. And usually the person who suffers the most are women. And it's women who are instigating all of these terrible ideas out of empathy.
Yep. So I've been recalibrating my feeds on social media because over time I keep looking at the things that I'm interested in, and like it does for all of us, it sort of narrows your world down. So every now and again, I just have to start branching out, just looking at stuff that I don't like, I'm not interested in, but I just need to widen that feed again. So right now I'm getting a lot of feminist type propaganda, a lot of anti-men kind of propaganda coming into my feed, and I recognize that's only representative of a certain a certain kind of mindset, a certain kind of woman. It's certainly not representative of all women, but I've been watching the tone. And the tone is basically women are unsafe because men exist. You know, we're not safe in our homes. We're not safe in our workplace. We're not safe on the street. We're not safe when we go shopping. Women are safe nowhere because men exist, right? Men are the problem. And they're never more precise than that. Just men. Men are the problem. And you know what's funny was whether you call it God's design or whether you call it evolution and social construct, whatever you want to call it, we figured out a solution to that. And that was to find a safe man and become a part of his life permanently.
Yeah.
Right? That was the solution. Go find a man who is going to use all of those masculine characteristics, the strength and all of that. Yes, okay, we're physically bigger. We can't help that. You can't help that. Go and find a good one, or at least one that you believe is good, and attach yourself to him. And if you discover that the one you're with is bad, go to some of the other men and get their help, because most men will want to protect you. There is an instinct built into men, for most of us, that we will protect a woman. If there's a woman in trouble, we will protect her. And the problem is there's a small number of predatory men who cause all of the problems. And as a result, now we've got these feminists saying, oh, all men are like this. And they're just painting with this incredibly broad brush. And like you said, these women with their suicidal empathy and these liberal ideals, like what you showed on that graph a minute ago, they are the ones driving a lot of this stupidity. And in the end, it's the women. Surprise, surprise. They're not protected by good men because they're, feminists try and keep them away. There's no such thing. And then where do they go? Where do they end up?
Yeah, and you would have seen this as well. I'm just trying to bring it up. The Supreme Court case that's currently happening in America. Have you been following this?
Which one? There's a bajillion of them.
Yeah, no, this is with SCOTUS. So this was hilarious. I'm just trying to pull it up now because this sort of ties into it. So obviously Supreme Court, the highest court in America, right? It doesn't get any bigger than that. They're contesting the state legislation around banning trans women from female sports. And basically, the lawyer who was, I always forget which one it is, but the lawyer who's pro-trans rights couldn't define what this was. And I've got to bring this clip up. So I've got to find it, because when you hear this woman speak, you will sort of just go, right. So the oral arguments, here we go.
All right. While you're looking for that, I'm going to touch on this super chat for just a second. Phonic Photon, this is a great question. I want to come back to this a little later because we're going to talk about the polling with One Nation and also this legislation, the hate speech legislation that's in front of Parliament. That's all on the list for this week. So that comment will tie in very well when we get to that. So hold tight there, Phonic Photon. Hopefully you can stick around. Have you got it?
Yeah.
All right, more super chats. Banana Mags in Pajamas says, T-shirt idea. The government hats you. Like baseball caps or like broad brim Akubras. I'm not sure. No, the government hates you, I assume is what that's meant to say. The government hates you, act like it. Well, it's certainly true. T-shirt idea, I don't know, Carlz. We'll have to handball that one to you and see what sort of a design you can come up with. Ricky Hammer says, I would suggest this is the same as the devouring mother archetype that has plagued civilization for millennia. This is harking back to a little bit earlier in the conversation. Archetype, have a drink, everybody. Yeah, it's, that devouring mother, Jordan Peterson sort of repopularized that back into the public consciousness. Obviously, these archetypes predate him, but he sort of popularized that one, and it is a problem. It is a problem. Daniel Moore responding to that video that you played that traumatized us all, Carly. What did I just see? And James commenting on the birthday party. If drinks are at bar prices, I hope you guys will be sparing with mentions of Venezuela and master's degrees. No, we will. We intend to have half of you go home in the back of an ambulance. That's our objective, just privately between the two of us. We will be making sure that this is an event that makes the news for the sheer number of stomach pumps required afterwards. How you doing with that video?
I've got a couple. I just want to make sure it's the right one. So let me bring it up. I'm pretty sure this is the right one. So this could be groundbreaking, and this is fascinating. I was watching, what's his name? Michael Knowles from the Daily Wire talking about this today. And like or not like the Daily Wire, I thought his argument was really interesting. So this is that sort of trap that the progressives set for themselves. They want you to adhere to a gender identity and say that that's different to sex. But to say that there's a gender identity, you have to be able to define sex. So this case that's currently in front of the SCOTUS is talking about, is it constitutional to ban trans women from female sports? Now, to do that, you would say, like, well, is this done on the exclusion of sex? So what is the sex? You have to be able to define this. You
have to define it.
So
you got no choice.
I think this is the clip. So let me just play it.
As a boys, let's say, track team and a girls track team. The school has that. And a student who has the genes and the reproductive system of a male and had those at birth and has never taken puberty blockers, never taken female hormones, never had any gender altering or affirming surgery, says, nevertheless, I am a woman. That's who I am. Can the school say, no, you cannot participate on the girls' team?
So, sorry, so you're just a birth sex male who has all the advantages of birth sex male hormones, and can the school bar him from the women's team? Yes, they can.
But that person, is that person not a woman in your understanding? If the person says, I sincerely believe I am a woman, I am in fact a woman.
I think
is that person not a woman?
I would respect their self-identity in addressing the person, but in terms of the statute, I think the question is, does that person have a sex-based biological advantage that's going to make it unfair for that person to be part of the women's team? And that's the rationale for the regulation. And so that's the way we would be testing that hypothetical.
Well, the reason I'm asking has to do with discrimination on the basis of transgender status. So what you seem to be saying is, yes, it is permissible for the school to discriminate on the basis of transgender status, because if this person is a trans woman, a trans girl, and is barred from the team, from the girls' team, then that person is being subjected to differential treatment based on transgender status, right?
Well, that would be, then the question would be whether it was the scrutiny would.
That's actually not the clip I wanted, but you can hear what's going on. So the lawyer for ACLU, who is going there to
that's the female. The lawyer's the female, and that's Justice Alito, I think it is.
Yeah. So she basically, she cannot define what a sex is, and she's prohibited from because of their ideology. And so they keep going round and around. And the last clip I want to play you is Clarence Thomas, because he makes a really good point. So I'm just going to bring this up. Let's go. Oh, no, that's not even a video. Okay, I've done terrible today, guys. But he basically asked, like, what remedy are you seeking? Because they can't define it. So they want trans women to be able to play in women's sports, but they can't define sex. Therefore, you can't discriminate based on sex. So what is the remedy to this? And the reason I find this particularly interesting, the transgender thing aside, is that they're now being caught up in this. And Michael Knowles actually made a really good point that I agree with. This is the hill that the progressive left are dying on, and this is the hill that the Democrats won't let go of. And this is actually what has made most of the more moderate lefties, abandon the thing, because essentially the only people that suffer from this are biological women. So your traditional feminists, think you're like 1970s feminist.
Yep.
Either you accept that a biological man who now identifies as a woman gets more rights than the biological woman, or you become a TERF. They're your options.
And we can verify that the 1970s feminists are quite happy to become TERFs, because we have the likes of Martina Navratilova, former world #1 women's tennis player, one of the first openly lesbian elite level sports players in the world. Unquestionably a feminist, unquestionably broke glass ceilings. She is now persona non grata. She is considered to be a TERF because she got off the train before it went trans. We've got J.K. Rowling. Everyone knows about her. We've got Germaine Greer, unquestionably a champion of feminism for decades, a celebrated hero of the feminist cause. And she repudiates any of this sort of transgender stuff. As a, she went up to her stop on the train and she got off. And the train kept going, and she's calling it out now the same way that other people were calling the train out while it was still on its way to her stop. It's quite funny to kind of watch these people flip. They'll decry you and try and tear down your arguments, slippery slope arguments and things like that. And then once they get off the train, they're using the exact same arguments that you were using about them only a few years earlier. But we know that what's happening now is not feminism. What's happening now is actually the erasure of women. And the progression, this is a very, very crude way to put it, but your original feminists essentially said women have rights too, right? Because there was a time when women essentially didn't have rights. They could be treated like property in a divorce. Their word wasn't equal to a man's word in a court of law. Now, this varied in different parts of the world. In some parts of the world, that's still the case. They didn't have rights in inheritances in many parts of the world. They certainly couldn't vote, own a business, own land, all sorts of different things. So the early feminists said, hey, we have rights too. The second wave feminists said, well, we should have the same rights as a man. So this is where you started to push through. So women could already own businesses and property, and they had inheritance rights. Now they wanted to vote. That was actually already in kind of a second phase of feminism. Then women said, hey, we can be like men. Right? They wanted to have equality in terms of the number of executives and the number of how much they got paid in sport and all this sort of stuff. And they fought hard for that. And that's, you get into the era of your Martina Navratilovas, et cetera. In that time, this was a huge issue, was women's pay in sport during, in tennis. And it still is to a much lesser degree today. But that was kind of their whole push. We should be treated equal to men. We should have equal outcomes to men, despite the obvious biological differences. Well, they kind of got what they wanted. And now we've got to the point where someone took another step beyond that. And now we don't even know what a woman is compared to a man anymore. We can't tell the difference. And so in a sense, I see this as a progression of the exact same ideology. Now, I'm not opposed to basic rights for women. Of course not. Equality before the law, absolutely essential. Every individual is equal, and that should be the case, male or female. But it was kind of inevitable that if they got what they wanted, if they erased the distinguishing features between men and women by insisting on equal outcomes, irrespective of those differences. Well, once you erase those differences, I'm sorry, you've erased those differences, and you're going to have a hard time putting them back in place. And that's where we are now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think this transgender stuff, when it looks like SCOTUS is going to uphold the ban, right? Like because the definitions are so elusive and no one can seem to define what a sex is. How do you say there's this discrimination on the basis of sex? And I think this will be the beginning of the end for the woke, right? Because how much more can you push this when it's so it's so illogical, and there's no consensus of what it is definable by law. So if you can't define it, how can you protect it?
Yeah. All right. We need a palate cleanse to move on from this. We've got some much more pressing domestic stuff, but I've got a palate cleanse for a change. It's me. Okay. I've got the palate cleanse. It's normally you. So we all know about the bushfires. Horrible situation. Thankfully, minimal loss of life, but not none, tragically, but certainly some loss of property. I personally know a few people who have been affected to varying degrees. But these are the moments where we see Aussies really sort of come together and shine in a really beautiful way. And this video crossed my feed. I want to play it for you. There we go. This is a bunch of vehicles coming, trailers on it. All this, a lot of youthful trailers, but a couple of trucks as well. And they're all pulled into, this is actually, the siding that they're in is actually a weighbridge for commercial trucks, but they're not all being weighed. The government hasn't pulled them up and stopped them. They're simply pulling in there because that was the place that was big enough for them all to stop and kind of regroup and gather. These are people of their own free will grabbing hay off their own property or hay that they could get from somebody else donated, and they're on their way to the fire-affected farmers and properties to make sure that those that have surviving cattle, surviving sheep, etc., have feed for them. And I just think this is a really, really beautiful part of Australia. Not the physical place, but the people and what this represents, and the way that Australians come together in moments like this. That just makes my heart sing.
I think I've said this on multiple podcasts now, that no one does that better than an Aussie. Like, we have each other's back, and we see it in the floods. We see it in the bushfires. When Aussies need to, we will bend over backwards to support each other. And I love that about Australians. We are always willing to help out a mate. And when the government gets out of the way and you let the Aussies do what they do best, it's a beautiful thing. But the problem is the government always gets involved, and then they regulate everything, and then they try and keep us divided. But I think like that alone just shows you it's so inherent in us. We do care about each other, and
100%.
When push comes to shove, no one was asking you what your pronouns were. No one was asking you if you're a liberal or a right wing nut job. Like, no one was calling you a cooker. When when true problems strike, or natural disasters or whatever, none of that shit's relevant. None of it.
Yep. No, I think it's a beautiful thing. Australia's an amazing country run by imbeciles. All right. So we got a couple of other stories that we want to get to. Do you have a preference?
I've got the video of Pauline Hanson. So do you want to go there?
All right, so let's go to polling first. Let me, I've just got to unshare. Well, let me do this one more time. We've now got nearly 900 people watching. Guys, the first birthday party is confirmed. It is happening on the 21st of the 2nd, 21st of February this year. It's going to be in the inner east Bayside suburbs of Melbourne. We're not giving away the location just yet, but it is booked. And we are going to do an episode of the Oddcast live on stage in front of you, interactive with the audience. There's going to be a couple of giveaways and a bit of other nonsense. I'll be doing a bit of a stand-up comedy, and I saw someone made a comment. Here we go, James Bennett's. I just booked, and then I heard that Topher will do stand-up. I'm now considering a refund request. No need to request it, James. I've already forced through a refund, and your name will be on the door with a picture saying, "Do not let him in." No, I look forward to seeing you there, James. So Tickets are $49. That covers your entry, but it also covers canapes, light refreshments, drinks are over the bar at bar prices. You'll organize those for yourself, and we will make sure that the drinking game is going to be lively on the afternoon. Don't you worry about that. So maybe consider taking public transport. There is a train station right outside the event. So guys, you need to head to topherfield.com. I'll see if I've still got it saved in my computer. Yes, I do. All right, I'm just dropping the link into the chat again. Where's that going to go? That's going into, if I go across to live, it's going onto YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube on either the Oddcast HQ or on Topher Field, you should have a link now that you can check it out on. I just realized it hasn't gone out on my Facebook. Yeah.
I can tell you guys now that we've sold almost 100 tickets already. So
yeah, it's going nuts. So guys, get in. Click that link. Someone says where? Sydney, Brisbane. It's in Melbourne, so inner eastern Bayside suburbs of Melbourne. So you'll need to head down to. Is this in some sort of left wing city that I'm too normal to visit? Yes, unfortunately, it is. The risk of Melbourne trains. Lots of people. Can you change the date, please? I have my gender reassignment surgery on that date. Oh, you guys are funny. All right, so that is coming up. So guys, get your tickets. They will sell out pretty quick. I'm going to be promoting them, assuming that they don't all sell out tonight. I'll be promoting them on my videos, etc. We expect they're going to sell out pretty quick. So make sure that you get into that. Now, let me get rid of this. I want to show the poll before we get to what Pauline Hanson said, just to give context. So I've got a tab open here, this one here. All right, share that and put it on the screen. Thank you. Now, it's going to be a little bit small, but this is the actual the Australian page for the post. This is their official poll. The headline news is on the right-hand side here, where my cursor is. Coalition got 21%. One Nation got 22%. Now, this is first preference intention. Who are you putting the number one next to? Now, what's really funny to me is that a lot of people online are pulling out this two-party preferred result, 55% to 45%. Notice who they pitted against the ALP against in their two-party preferred comparison. Still the Coalition, despite the fact that actually the opposition now is One Nation, right? So actually they need to run a two-party preferred comparison of Labor versus One Nation, not Labor versus the Liberal Party. Now, when the previous poll, Demos AU, came out with a poll a couple of weeks ago, they did both. They ran two-party preferred Labor versus Liberal, and they found Labor winning 52% to Liberal winning 48%, losing 48%. And there's always some variance between the polls.
You were somewhat dubious of that report too, because it was too early after Bondi. Is that correct?
No, you've always got to allow like a 4% margin. I always want to see 2 or 3 polls confirming. And so I would say, if this was the first one, I'd be similarly cautious with this one. But this is now the second major one that's come out and really reaffirmed One Nation are level with or ahead of the coalition. So, but what they found with Demos AU was when they ran Labor versus Liberal two-party preferred, Labor won by the 52% to 48. When they ran it, Labor versus One Nation, it was a 50-50 dead heat, because people preference differently, or the preferences flow differently depending on who you actually run it against. And so we're going to end up in a situation, I believe, in 18 months' time when this next election happens, that actually it's going to be a Labor versus One Nation contest in many lower house seats. Whether it'll be enough for them to win government is anybody's guess at this point. But I think there's going to be a lot of lower house seats that are actually going to come down to a race between Labor and One Nation. One Nation, Pauline Hanson should now be referred to as the leader of the opposition. That's what the polling is now very clearly saying.
They don't have many people in Victoria, do they, coming up for the November state election? Do they?
I actually don't know. I haven't really followed them at a state level. I do know that Ricky Lee Tyrrell was elected into the Victorian State Parliament for One Nation, but I'm not actually aware of how strong a ground game. I know Victoria is one of their weaker states from a ground game and a membership point of view. And to be honest, it's probably going to remain one of their weaker states compared to, say, Queensland, New South Wales, Western Australia, etc. But I don't know. I mean, it's a huge job to run a candidate in every seat and to have the volunteers handing out how to vote cards, the members in the branches. They're now setting up a branch structure. That's a huge reorganization. They've got a huge job ahead of them. So I'd say the momentum is with them. It's theirs to capture, but whether they have the organizational horsepower to capture that momentum, that's now the question over the next 18 months.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see how things start to play out as we get closer to November, because I mean, we know the Liberal Party here in Victoria is weak as piss. They're embarrassing, and it's going to be a Stephen Bradbury if they happen to somehow get it off Labor. What I'm curious to see is just how quickly that sentiment shifts. I mean, obviously Victoria is going to be a tough one. It's the wokest state. It's the most progressive state. But when you see just how bad things have gotten here, it's diabolical. And it's a combination of state-run policies and also federal. But you've got to ask yourself, if people who are living in Victoria aren't motivated to get this current government out at all costs, I'd be curious to see how it plays out on the federal stage as well.
Keep in mind, even in Victoria, they ended up voting in a majority against the Voice. And this is a really crucial thing. Polling bias and the self-selection bias of polling is a problem. And when people believe something really passionately and they believe that they're oh so virtuous, they are more likely to respond to a pollster than someone who knows that they're in the minority or believes they're in the minority and knows that other people might be angry at them if they were to say whatever it is that they believe. My wife and I saw this when we were in the US in 2016, not long before the first election of the 3 that Donald Trump won. And we were in parts of the US and we would talk to people. And we noticed that if they were a Hillary Clinton supporter, they would find a way to weave it into the conversation. It was like being a vegan. They found a way to tell you that they support Hillary Clinton. But then there were other people who wouldn't say anything at all. Yeah. And the assumption is, maybe they're not very politically active. So we began to ask them. We had to be careful. But if we were in a restaurant and we're on a table and there's not too many people around and the server's been really nice, we would sort of say, hey, what's with all this politics? Like, we're from Australia. We don't have a dog in this fight. Like, we play the outsider card. And it was funny because they would actually kind of do a head check and make sure no one could see. And they would lean in and their voice would get lower. And they'd say, actually, I really like Donald Trump. I think I might vote for Donald Trump. But it was that low voice thing. They weren't shouting it and they certainly weren't leading with it, whereas the Hillary Clinton supporters were. And when you see a dynamic like that, you know that the polling's going to be skewed, because who's going to answer the poll? The person who's out and proud or the person who's a bit apprehensive, right? And so we even the polls in Victoria eventually did turn against the Voice before they actually had the referendum. The polls in Victoria were showing that it was going to lose there, but it ended up losing by more. And I think it's partly this effect. And I wonder if there's this many people who are out and proud and willing to say that they're going to vote for One Nation, despite 30 years of Pauline being demonized personally and the party being relentlessly attacked. How many more are there that aren't going to answer a poll or might even lie in a poll because they feel that kind of social pressure, but in the privacy of that ballot box would actually put number one next to Pauline Hanson and then swear black and blue for the rest of their life they didn't do it?
Yeah. I mean, we wait and see, don't we? I think, like I said before about women particularly, when you get them away from their group, they're very different. And
they can actually be nice people when you get them when you get them away from that group effect. I've met women that are actually nice. It's quite remarkable, the difference.
No, you know, before I was saying about these new stereotypes of women have popped up when they're in their hive mind or when they're in their little echo chamber. They sort of feeding off each other, and you know, one will do the offense, one's doing the defense. And if you say something like, "Oh, you know, Donald Trump's policies aren't too bad," what do you mean? You're a bigot? And then they, you know, "Oh yeah, you're a bigot." You know, they sort of feed off each other.
In they go. Yeah.
When you peel them off, and when you're talking to them on a one-to-one basis, and you go, "Well, you know, I thought this part here where it's like we really care about this, and this is what I think was a great thing that he did." They're like, "Oh. Yeah, I mean, I can see why you would say that." Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a little bit easier to infiltrate their mind. I think when it comes to polling booths, and especially like when they're alone with their thoughts and they're faced with the realities of a cost of living crisis, of you know, them being erased in women's sports and things like that, I think if you got them on their own, they'd start to go, actually, I don't want to vote for a government that's doing this because it's actually impacting me, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's get to that video with Pauline.
All right, so this is based on what happened today. So I'm just going to pull this up. Go X. All right.
This is going to happen a lot too, as well. Truth Oz says, "Mum hated Pauline for years. Now she has magically always supported her." That's going to happen a lot. Bandwagoning.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. 100%.
All right. So I watched this same news conference. I'm going to let you play it. And then I'm going to draw attention to something that I think is really significant. And I'm going to telegraph it by saying, I've been asking the question, who is going to lead this party as the alternative prime minister? Right. Pauline's in the Senate. And yes, it's a convention that senators can't be prime minister. It's not sort of set in stone, but nevertheless, it's a pretty solid convention. And I don't think Pauline's suited to being the prime minister. And I think she knows that. Watch this press conference and see what you pick up.
All right. Let's play it from the start.
I have been denied my right to do this on the floor of Parliament in the Senate. It is matter of fact by the will of the PM and the Leader of the Senate, Penny Wong. Also, on behalf of my colleagues and fellow members of Parliament who are with me today, I want to thank the Australian people for their support and confidence. They are now advocating for One Nation. This is the first poll in Australia's history that another party is polling higher than one of the major parties. I am proud to acknowledge One Nation is polling higher than the Liberals. Thank you. I have been denied my right.
Oh, it stopped there. Okay.
Sorry.
So she then takes. No, that's okay. Is that the end of that video?
It is. Let me see if I can find the rest of it. Hang on.
No, it's okay. Okay, so I'll just tell you. So they then go to questions, and they ask her some questions, and she answers them. And I was listening carefully, and the question I was asking myself was, is she Prime Minister material? Not for me, but for the average person. Can the average Australian tolerate her as Prime Minister? And I think the answer is no. And the reality is, if she runs as the prospective prime minister, even out of the Senate, and they say, hey, we're just going to break that convention, it's not that big of a deal, that's not going to bring new votes. Anyone that would vote for Pauline as prime minister is already voting for One Nation, whether she's the prime ministerial candidate or not. They need to pick a prime ministerial candidate who brings in people who wouldn't vote for Pauline. They wouldn't want to make her the prime minister, but they would support the party under different management. So what happens is they then get to a question, was someone in the media scrum asks a question about whether or not they're going to essentially how they're going to go filling out the seats and becoming a party of government, how they're going to go about, are you going to get new people from the Liberals defecting? How are you going to go about this massive job that you've got that I mentioned a minute ago of reinventing themselves and preparing themselves? And she says, actually, I'm going to let Barnaby take that question. And she steps aside and puts Barnaby in to answer that question. Now, Barnaby avoided the question largely, as you would expect, but immediately tells me two things. Number one, Pauline, in her mind, already knows that there are things that there's PR messaging that is better coming out of somebody else's mouth than hers. Secondly, the person she turns to is Barnaby Joyce. He's a new member. He's a lower house member. Okay, yes, she's got 3 other senators standing around her who are elected members of the Australian Parliament. She goes to him. That, I think, says something about the dynamic of that relationship and how it is that she sees Barnaby fitting in. Now, the answer to the question was basically, oh, look, there's lots of time, there's lots of options. Whether people choose to defect is a matter for them, like really just kind of avoiding the whole thing. And the reality is they may end up with other really, really excellent candidates defecting to them from these other parties, which on paper would be an option that could run. But the truth is, now that they're beating the Liberal National Party in the polls, anyone that defects now is going to have the cloud of being a bandwagoner. Oh, you only defected because you thought you were going to lose your seat. You defected because you wanted to be on the winning team. Whereas Barnaby Joyce, the difference is only a matter of months, but he defected at a time when she was still a pariah, when she was still being pilloried. She wasn't being taken. Even now, the tone has already shifted. They're taking her a lot more seriously and they're treating her a lot better. The media are treating her a lot better than they used to. So I genuinely believe that Barnaby Joyce has to be their pick. He has to run in the lower house, in my opinion, so that they maintain that convention. And that dynamic in that press conference, as it played out before my eyes, I went, I reckon internally, if not a decision has already been made, at a minimum, some conversations have been had.
Sorry, there's a lot of commotion going outside my window. What I'm excited to see is the relationship to Pauline Hanson, what's her name? Fatima Payman, Marine Faruqi, and Penny Wong, and all those guys who, remember it was months ago when Pauline wore the hijab again, and there was all of this vitriol from all the Green senators saying this is outrageous, it's racist. I truly do wonder what will be the rhetoric now, given that they see the polls. So up until that point, the Greens would have thought that, because they're aligned with Labor, most people lean left, most people are siding with their views. I think post Bondi, and now seeing that the polls are shifting so much towards One Nation, they have been saying that it's just right-wing extremists, it's just the fringes, seeing this happen. I think people are now going, I'd be curious to see what the Greens are going to say.
Yeah.
Sorry, did I say?
So I want to draw your attention. I want to draw your attention back to this Australian poll, because have a think about how different the media coverage would be if instead of One Nation overtaking the Liberals, if it was the Greens overtaking Labor.
Yeah,
right?
Especially the APC.
If the Greens had just polled 1% higher than Labor, how much they'd be being championed, how much this would be all about. This is because Labor have been trying to, they've been too right-wing for too long. This is the inevitable consequence. This is the Australian people becoming more progressive. This is a permanent shift in Australia's political landscape. That's what the narrative would be. Because it's One Nation outflanking the Liberal Party, it's the extremists, it's a blip in the polls, it's because of Bondi, people will snap back, they'll say one thing in the polls, but they won't actually vote for her when it comes to it. The narrative is really, really negative. Now, having said that, it's a lot less negative than what I've seen in the past against Pauline. But nevertheless, just as a thought experiment, just have a think about what the headlines would say if it was the Greens overtaking Labor.
Yeah. Yep. I think, your more moderate people are starting to go, who of our political leaders is talking common sense? Who can I actually get behind? And of all of the leaders, the only one that appears to talk common sense and have a backbone at the moment is Pauline. I mean, there's a handful of people in the Liberal Party. Hastie's a good example, just the price. But I mean, from a leader point of view, we have such weak leaders in both our state parliaments and our federal parliaments. It's
100%.
embarrassing. And you got to think of, like, you know, apart from your silent majority, what are our business leaders thinking? What are the people at the top of their game in different industries all sitting there going, what are they doing to this country? This is impacting so many industries all at the same time. All anyone ever focuses on is fossil fuels, and they look at you know, Gina Reinhart and go, oh, Gina's friends with Pauline. What about everyone outside of that? Any of your average business owners are looking at this going, if it's Labor, they're running us into the ground. If it's Liberals, they're not speaking up for us. The only people who seem to be speaking up for us is Pauline.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we've got a couple of other topics we need to get to, but I'm mindful we've now got 1,000 people watching, and there'll be a few people that haven't seen this yet. So apologies to those of you that have, but I want to give everyone watching tonight an opportunity to grab some tickets before they sell out. The first birthday of the Oddcast has now been set. The date is the 21st of February this year. So coming up in, what's that going to be, 4 weeks' time, just over 4 weeks' time. It is in the inner Bayside suburbs of Melbourne. Location has been booked, but we're not publicising it yet. Obviously, if you buy your tickets, you will get notified. Tickets are $49. That will cover your entry and also light refreshments, canapes. Drinks are at bar prices. We're going to do an episode of the Oddcast right there in front of you, interactive with the audience. We are going to do some giveaways and have some fun little gimmicks and some other nonsense as well to make it worth your while, because finally we have the chance to actually do something with you guys right there with us in the room. We're going to make the most of that. So I've pasted the link a few times into the comments. I guess I should probably do it again because there will be people who can't scroll back. This is the link. Get on there and buy. My phone keeps buzzing. I've lost track, but certainly a lot of tickets have already sold. So do make sure you get in there tonight and get yourself into the Oddcast. I'm just trying to scroll down and make sure that this has actually worked. Yes, it has. Good. All right. So the link is in YouTube, on the Oddcast HQ and on the Topher Field YouTube pages. Look, we're only going to turn one once. Be there or be square.
Yep. Yep. And you get to say that you were there since the beginning.
Yeah, I've been right there. I've been there since their first birthday bash. And look, there's only 200 people allowed in this one because that was the venue we could get. If we grow this year the way that I think we will, we might be looking for a town hall with a capacity of 1,000 people for the next one. There may never be another one as intimate, as small and as personal as what this one's going to be. So do make sure you get there.
Here we go. We've got a good super chat here. Hypothetical, what would the poll look like if the Nationals and One Nation were a coalition?
So it's really hard to say because the Nationals only run in a minority of seats. They deconflict with the Liberals. And so on paper, the Nationals percentage is actually really low, but that's because they only run in a certain number of seats. In theory, it would probably shift the needle by about 4 or 5%. However, there's a lot of bad blood between the Nationals and One Nation right now. I think that One Nation will stick with the Liberals. They'll go down with that ship for at least the next election. After that, we'll see. Loyalty in politics. If you want loyalty in politics, get a dog. It's certainly not impossible that they would switch, but I think with the amount of bad blood that exists between the parties right now, I'm going to say this isn't likely to happen for the upcoming election.
I think you'll just see, exactly like you said, a lot more defections, and more so just because seeing a whole bunch of Liberal senators leave in Victoria as well, I think people are just done. We like to look at all politicians as fundamentally evil. I would argue that most of them come into it. I mean, not all. I'm painting with a broad brush, but I think the majority of people that come into politics do so because they feel like they can make a difference or they could do something. Yep. And then they get in the system and they get in the swamp and then everything changes. I mean, I'll give you an example. In Victoria, we've got Nicole Werner. She is a Liberal. She's a new Liberal. It's her first time in Parliament. And the content she's putting out is absolutely sensational. And this is what we want from our politicians. We want people who are out there, pointing out the ridiculousness of their policies, pointing out how much money they're wasting. I mean, she did one recently talking about Jacinta Allen's personal cabinet and how she has 20 social media advisors. Actually, I'm going to play it for you because I think this is what we want to see from our politicians. Let me pull it up.
Just peeling back the curtain a little bit and giving us a bit of an inside look into that world.
And mocking them the way we as Aussies would mock them, like we're looking at this going, this is ridiculous what's going on here. And to see that coming from a politician, I mean, she's also a millennial. She's a young mum. So she's speaking our language. So let me pull it up. Here you go. It was her most recent one? This one.
Have a look. 20. That seems like a lot. Yeah, we sort of just kept adding them. What do they all do? Well, see this one, he organises the nodders. The nodders, you know, the people who stand behind at press conferences and nod along. Sounds a bit unnecessary. What about the other 19? Well, this one manages the Premier's Instagram and Facebook ads. So we spent about $220,000 on them last year. Probably going to increase it next year. All on the department credit card, of course. $220,000. What's she advertising? Mostly photos in high-vis standing next to government projects. That is insane. What about this one? Well, that one tells the Premier when to say no comment. You need a person for that. No comment. Okay, what about this advisor? Hard hat compliance advisor. He makes sure that in every photo, the Premier's wearing a hard hat, even if it's indoors. Of course they do. And this one, that one refreshes Twitter all day, so we know exactly when the public is angry enough for us to issue a statement, but not enough for us to actually do anything about it. We call them the outrage monitor. Sounds busy. Very, especially with the crime crisis. Right. And this one, that one is a blame allocation advisor. So he determines whether we're going to blame a previous government, geopolitical event or weather pattern or whatever scapegoat that fits the situation. Unbelievable. So there's 20 media advisors. How many staff overall are in the Premier's office? About 83. That's more than the Prime Minister. Yeah, but the Prime Minister just runs the country. The Premier runs the state of Victoria. So how much do these staff cost the taxpayer every year? Roughly $19 million. $19 million.
Yeah, that is good.
That's the content I want from my local MPs. I think that's sensational.
Yeah, no, that is good. And I'm mindful actually of, was it Utopia? I know Utopia was like a planning department. What was the one that was set in the Premier's, in the Prime Minister's office? It was Rob Sitch and a bunch of those guys. It was very, very good. I'm sure everyone's probably shouting it at me in the comments. Guys, if you know which show I'm talking about, shout it at me in the comments. I'll scroll down to the bottom right now. It's actually very reminiscent of that kind of humor. And it's funny that, yeah, it's just an MP can do it in her social media now. It used to require an ABC budget to be able to produce that sort of stuff. Gosh, what is that show? The Hollow Men. The Hollow Men. Look up The Hollow Men if you've never seen it. It is such a cutting Australian, Hollow Men, this one. Such a cutting Australian comedy and applicable whether you're left or right or whatever. It's just always true. Yeah. No, that's the sort of stuff we want to see. But we also need to see that translate into fight in Parliament. We can't just have it be, I'm getting clicks, I'm building a following for my post-politics career. We need to see that translate into real fight in Parliament. And if you don't mind, I'm going to segue because there is a big fight in Parliament going on right now. And that is over this disinformation bill. That was the last fight. This one is about these new hate speech laws. And I got to say the politics in this, I'm going to get a little bit excited and get into the weeds here, but people need to understand this stuff. This is the stuff that people go, yawn, it's too arcane, it's too intricate, it's too detailed. No, this stuff matters because it helps you to see just how cynical these people are, just how little they care about you and about democratic process and about doing what's right. And it helps you to highlight it to others and help others to see. So Albo wanted to ram through a bunch of reforms, some to do with speech and, these sort of criminalizing hate speech. If someone is made to fear harassment, then you should go to jail. He also wanted to outlaw a bunch of groups. So he wanted to be able to just ban entire groups. That appears to me to be a pretty transparent attempt to make sure that the White Australia Party never forms. I've got no love for the White Australia Party, but I don't think we should be doing that to just destroy political parties before they even exist. But nevertheless, that's what he wants. He also wants reform to immigration policy and for the minister to have more discretion than he's already got. And he also wants to have reforms around gun laws and get funding for his gun buyback. These are four distinct things. And even within them, there's there's multiple things going on. These should be four separate bills because he's reforming four entirely separate areas of law. But he put it together in what's called an omnibus bill. Now, I don't think this should be allowed. I think that they should have to vote individually on each law that they want to reform, but it is allowed. And the reason they do this, they bundle it all together, is because they're trying to wedge the opposition. So, for example, the opposition might say, well, we don't support the reforms on guns, but we do support the reforms on hate speech. So now we've got to decide, are we going to vote for all of it or against all of it? And no matter which way we go, we're going to have voted against something that, and we would have voted not according to how we wanted to vote. And our base is going to be mad at us, right? So your objective is to put together an omnibus bill where your base will be happy with all of it and their base will be happy with half of it. Right. And so that way you unite your base around the omnibus bill and you divide their base. That's the game. It's cynical, but that's the game. That's why he put the omnibus bill together. The problem is it backfired. So the Nationals came out. David Littleproud, to his credit, I've got very little nice things to say about David Littleproud, but to his credit, he came out strongly against the gun side of things, saying we're not going to support this. The Greens had real concerns about the speech side of it because it was actually going to criminalize a lot of the things that they'd said and done in the various rallies and protests that they'd been a part of. So they looked at it and went, uh-oh, this is going to be a bit dangerous for us. And so actually by having everything jammed in together, he lost the support of the coalition and he lost the support of the Greens. Now, at that point, he still has an option available, which is to split the bill. So that's what he's done. So it's kind of when you bundle it all together in an omnibus, you can't lose. Right? Your worst case scenario, you get forced to split it back up again, which is what he's done. And he's split the gun stuff and he's split all the immigration and the hate group stuff. And he has had to drop the speech stuff. That's an important win. It's not a total victory, but it's an important win. All that hate speech stuff that was going to be really dangerous to you and I, Carly, as well as to a lot of other people, that's gone. So thank God for that. That's an important win. But nevertheless, what they're still trying to do is really, really, really awful. So now what he's trying to do is pass the gun stuff with the support of the Greens and pass the banning of hate groups and the immigration reforms with the support of the Liberal National Party. So by breaking it down now, he's playing the opposite game. He's saying, right, we'll team up with you over here. We'll team up with you over here. And in the end, I get everything that I want. And you guys only get part of what you want. So it's really, really cynical politics at its most obvious. Yeah. Add to that how quickly he's doing it. A major law reform by rights should take 6 months or more because there needs to be open for inquiry. There were 7,000 submissions. They opened it for inquiry for 2 days. There were 7,000 submissions. And 2 days after the inquiry closes, they're going to vote on it? Who's read any of those submissions? No one, of course. He's actually literally saying, hey, Australian people, we don't care. We haven't taken it into account. We haven't looked at it. We're not going to. We actually don't care. He is literally flaunting in the face of the Australian people that he's got power. He's going to get what he wants, and what you want and what you think literally no longer matters to him.
Mm-hmm. And I love this comment here from Mike Hunt. What happens, chat, when the hate speech laws come through and they backdate it to Topher and Carl's stream and we all end up in the same jail? I stand by this. Time. We're going to have a great time, guys. We're going to be in there with some good company. Look, when it comes to this hate speech stuff, the good thing for us, not good for the UK, but we can see this happening in the UK. And again, the mainstream media won't talk about this, but I think a lot of our politicians think the Aussie, the Aussie voter base are dumber than we are. This is why they're so adamant on trying to ban X or rein X in, because I've said this before in previous podcasts, they cannot get in front of these stories quick enough because it takes them so long to react. What's our stance? What's our, what's our reaction? You just saw in that Nicole Werner clip, they have all these people who help them craft the messaging. The problem with X is that all of these stories, like this Amsterdam story, it's everywhere and everyone's already across it. The only problem about X is not enough people are on it yet. I think more and more people are joining X. But a lot of these nuanced stories that sort of paint the picture of where the UK and Europe are going aren't necessarily getting to your average Aussie voter. They're getting there anecdotally. They're getting there, via like third and second-hand information. But I think with Albanese now and these laws, I think there's enough Australians who have seen what's going on in Europe, seen what's going on in the UK and going, absolutely not. And, do you know what I find bizarre is, it's one of your T-shirts, right? Too much 1984, not enough 1776.
Yep.
Most Gen X, most boomers, not so much millennials. I certainly didn't read it at school, but most average, your average adult have read 1984 or are aware of it. It's playing out, and there seems to be this inability for us to recognize it when it's us. We think it's this like abstract concept that happens in faraway lands.
Yep.
We literally have our sitting government today in 2026 talking about whether or not Australians have the right to speak freely and express their opinions around
Yep.
what's going on politically. And people don't seem to think that's a problem. It's bewildering.
Yeah, it's incredible. Now, I want to come back to a super chat that I said I was going to come back to because now's the time to do it. Okay, so Phonic Photon. So this is a very political question. We're talking now about what's going on in Canberra right now. If we were to abolish political parties and the Westminster system in general, how would you achieve that? I've got a whole host of other questions around that, Phonic Photon. Why would you choose to do that? Because the only reason you would do that is if you have something better in mind. And sadly, the world is not ready for an anarcho-capitalist system, a truly voluntarist system. And so, unfortunately, the only way you're going to abolish what we have now is if you've convinced a majority of people that you've got something better. And to abolish the government and replace it with nothing is a political non-starter, unfortunately. But also, I do actually think that the Westminster system is one of the least bad systems that we have. Now, I want to touch on the political party side of things. Political parties are not mentioned in the Constitution, and they weren't, I don't think, originally envisaged. But this is the natural way of humans, is we want to team up. We want to try and form a winning team. And so the original idea was that every candidate was going to stand as an independent. They would all the elected ones would go to Canberra and then figure it out amongst themselves who was going to be the Prime Minister and so forth. There weren't supposed to be these parties in the way that they happen now. But what happened then was someone figured out, well, hey, if I have a whole bunch of candidates in all of these seats in a coalition, and they've already pre-agreed that I'll be the Prime Minister if we get a majority, then we can campaign on the basis of, well, we're going to get these policies, right? Because if it's an individual independent lower house MP, they can say, well, I'm going to support these things, but I'm only going to be one of, 140 or whatever it is, 142 lower house, I should know that number off the top of my head, but I actually don't, lower house members of parliament. So I actually can't do a lot. But if they group together like that, well, now they can say, well, I'm going to deliver on these things. And they can make a bunch of promises and spend our money recklessly and do all the things that we see today. So by grouping together as parties, it's not outlawed in the Constitution. It's not in the Constitution, but it's not outlawed. They're just basically pre-agreeing that if they get into parliament, they're going to be the ones that work together. All right. And that was envisaged in the Constitution. Not that it would be pre-agreed, but that once they got there, they'd have to figure out how to work together and who was going to be Prime Minister and all of that stuff. Political parties are as natural as unions. They're as natural as social groups. They're as natural as any kind of organic organizing of humans around a common purpose and in common self-interest. And I don't think we should be seeking to outlaw them, because even if you tried to outlaw the appearance of them, backroom deals would still happen. Again, you just push it underground. So I like the question. It's a left field question. It's a challenging question, but I'm not sure that it's. I don't see anything to be gained, and I don't see what's really possible in that regard. If I felt like the world had moved so much that we were ready for a genuine voluntarist system, well, then this would be a question I'd spend a lot more time on. But honestly, of all of the systems in the world, the Westminster system is one of the much less bad ones. And the success of Australia up to this point in time, I think, is evidence of that. And the fact that we can fight back, and we talked about One Nation already, the fact that we can fight back within the system, I think, is also one of its great virtues. That we can talk about political organizing, we can talk about winning politicians over, we can talk about pressuring politicians and changing political incentives. The fact that the Westminster system allows we, the people, to fight back at a political level, I think, is one of its great virtues as well. So that's kind of all I've got to say on that. How would I achieve it? Well, I don't think I would at the moment. I don't think that's something I'd try and achieve at the moment.
Do you want to jump across to our news about Gen Z and Australia Day?
I think I do want to, but a new super chat's just come in. We'll jump onto this. If they can't put people in jail now, and by the way, VN Bogani, thank you. That's a very generous super chat.
Bogani or Bogan 1?
Bogan 1. Okay, VN Bogan 1. Bogani. I don't know. I put my Italian hat on for a second.
That's it. From now on, I'm no longer Carlz the Bogan. I'm Carlz the Bogani.
Bogani. Bouquet. Mrs. Bouquet. And now I see it. VN, of course, being the Commodore. VN Bogan 1. You've got good taste in cars. If they can't put people in jail now for real crimes, how are they going to put 12,000 of us in jail for Facebook posts? The thing is, they leave the real criminals on the street. That's the terrifying thing. We see this in Victoria already. They're not putting the machete criminals in prison because the prisons are full. Well, find the guy that's in there because he smoked a joint in the wrong place and let that guy out, right? Find the guy that's been, done 10 years of hard time and he's done a lot of work on himself, and he's sure he's got 5 years left on his sentence, but maybe he's a better bet to put under supervision in the community than someone who just attacked people with a machete last week. Like, they don't want to.
I think we know the real answer to this. It's the process. They tie you up in legal fight for 2-3 years. Right. And bankrupt you in the process. That's the go. Fines, torture you, make your life miserable, make you unemployable. That's how they punish you.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, I think the answer there is they've arrested 12,000 people in England. They haven't put 12,000 people in prison. They put a small number in prison, but they've arrested and therefore intimidated and punished through process 12,000 people. And that's what they'll do here as well. Phonic Photon's just got a follow-up to the conversation we just had. Both are too corruptible. So this is the Westminster system and the political parties. I agree. And that's a case of correctly diagnosing a problem. That doesn't mean that abolition is necessarily the right prescription. You've got to prescribe the right medicine to the problem. And I would say that what we're doing now, the organizing that we're seeing, the public rising that we're seeing, we're going to talk more about that in just a second. I think that is the right solution. So I think I'm going to say it again. I'm really optimistic about the future. I actually think we've not got this in hand. That's an invitation to take your foot off the gas. I think that if we keep going, we've got this. And I love the fact that we live in a system that allows us to do that, because there's many countries where I'd be a dead man long ago if I'd come out saying the sort of stuff I say in Australia, in many other countries. And in large part, it's the Westminster system and, in combination with our human rights heritage that allow me to do that. All right, let's get to Australia Day.
Yeah, so you want to talk about this first?
Yeah, look, so the Institute of Public Affairs do an annual study, and people say, oh, it's the IPA, blah, blah, blah. No, they do rigorous work. They have done an annual poll for a number of years now, asking people, do you want Australia Day to happen? Do you want it to be on January 26th? Should we change the date? All that sort of stuff. And they publish all their methods. They publish the questions. They do it all properly. Now, what's really interesting is that over the last 2 years, support for Australia Day in principle and support for it to remain on January 26th has gone through the roof. So 76% of Australians now support Australia Day being on January 26th, right? Now, that is up from 69% last year. That's a 7 percentage point increase, and 63% the year before. So it's a 13 percentage point jump in just 2 years. Now, Carly, you and I have talked a lot about what we believe is this massive cultural shift that is happening. And it really started to pick up momentum on the way out of the COVID madness. And I think it's unrelenting. I think we've only seen the beginning of it at this point in time. This is yet another metric, another data point that I wasn't aware of this prior to this most recent release from the IPA. I wasn't aware of it last year. So I didn't base my view that change was happening on data like this. But everywhere I look, I'm finding more data like this. Now, what's interesting as well is that only 1 in 10, so that's 10% of Australians oppose Australia Day happening on January 26th, down from 14% last year and down from 17% in 2024. So it's not just that support is growing, but actually people willing to identify themselves as being in opposition is actually really markedly shrinking. Now, this is interesting in and of itself, but when they start to break it down, this is what's happening. Look, have a look at this graph. So all age groups is the darker line above. You can see that support was dropping and now it started climbing in the last few years. Look at the 18 to 24-year-old demographic. Their support for Australia Day being on January 26th was lower than the average and dropping. And now look what it's done in just the last couple of years. All right. And you can see they've been running this poll since 2018. So in just the last couple of years, 3 years really is when it started, something happened with the young people. And I think what this is that generation that you and I have talked about time and again, Carly, they're now starting to enter this 18 to 24 age bracket, and other people are starting to exit it. And we're watching now the effect. And I think as time goes by, this is going to become even more pronounced. Right now, young people, between the ages of 18 to 24, support Australia Day being on January 26th at a rate of 83%, and just 4% oppose. That's the young people. That's the future that we've got coming our way as these people grow up. I think that's huge.
You know it's big when you got the Daily Mail also covering it. You know, when it's hitting the the tabloids, you know that this is significant. What I think's
I'm not sure if you're being tongue in cheek there or not. I can't quite read your tone.
No, I mean that. I mean the fact that it gets picked up by the tabloids, that this is something that people want to talk about. I mean, the one thing I will say this quickly. My birthday is the 23rd of January. For the last decade at least, my birthday gets co-opted by this Australia Day conversation every year. This is my birthday. It's because we don't
care, Carly. It's because we don't care.
No. I am so sick to death of people talking about Invasion Day and Australia Day debate. The 23rd of January is Carly's Day. That's what we should be focused on. This needs to end. Anyway.
Now I know why you wanted to bring up this topic.
No. Do you know what, though? The one thing about being born before a long weekend is whenever I used to have house parties or whatever, everyone would be like, I'm going away for Australia Day. Very annoying. It's okay. It's all right. That's my trauma and I'm working through it. But what I believe has also happened here, because people have become so chronically online, it works both ways. It works for the left to a degree because, you know, they end up in echo chambers, right? Sure.
Yeah.
But you also see renaissance of previous cultures. So millennial core and Y2K core has been trending for the last 2-3 years. And what that is basically Gen Z cosplaying as millennials at the turn of the 90s, the early 2000s. Now, if you ask the average millennial, that's kind of their like glory years. That was when they're out partying, having fun. Now, I know Gen X did that too, but the reason I say millennials is they were the last generation to truly let go, have fun. And that was before social media truly had a chokehold on us. And what I think Gen Z is recognizing, now this is just me speculating, I haven't seen any data around this, but I see this purely from a marketing perspective. I always look at this from a more cultural trend. I think that Gen Z have become enamored with the life they never had. So, you know, they're embracing flip phones, they're embracing CDs, and all of a sudden they want to go back to analog stuff. Like, I kid you not, cassettes are making a comeback.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And the reason for this is because Gen Z is seeing a life that they were never, ever given access to. This ability to be connected to things, to have tangible things in your hand. And I think they are starting to recognize, whether it's subconsciously or consciously at this point, I think they're starting to recognize that they've been robbed of something. And I've said this before on the podcast multiple times. Gen Z has been brought up on fear. That's all they know. The world's going to end. They're never going to be able to afford a house. We're white colonizers. You should feel guilty for everything. That's Gen Z. Their entire, and people are going to fight me on Z and Z. I grew up in the American school system. I say Z, get over it. I'm not changing. I do what I goddamn want. All right. I will speak as I speak. Stop trying to control my speech. What are you, the government? Anyway. Right. So I really do think that has a lot to play with it as well. I think that Gen Z, they're starting to mature. They're in the workforce. And you got to think, like, you know, we're pretty hard on them as well. I mean, I certainly am, because, you know, they're so volatile. They're so difficult. And, you know, because
they deserve it.
Well, there is a portion of Gen Z that really, really rebel against this title. They're not like that. You know, they've got apprenticeships. They're working. They care about things. And good on them. I say that's fantastic. And we certainly don't give them enough credit. And I know there's a few of them watching this podcast because they let me know in the comments. But I think what we will see, you know, we talked about before, this suspended adolescence.
Yeah.
I think this is the kick up the ass that we have been hoping they get. They're getting the reality check. They're paying those taxes now. They're getting taxed to the nth degree. They're finding it very hard to get a job with all of their human rights degrees and all of these, you know, esoteric things that they were told. You can be what you want, darling. You just go out there and believe it. And the truth is that's not possible. The world gives you a reality check. Yeah. Whether your parents told you it was coming or not.
It's also the people a little bit younger. They're not in university yet. They're in high school. And they're in schools where there are kids running around.
That's Gen Alpha and the tail end of Gen Z, though.
Yeah, the tail end of Gen Z is what I'm talking about. They're in schools where they've got other students saying, oh, I'm a furry and you have to address me as meow. And they're watching as adults fail to stand up to them as the teachers and the faculty all kowtow. I've told the story before of a school. This is real. I've spoken in person. I've personally spoken to an eyewitness to this. And she was at school. She went there. They had a furry in the school. She went into the ladies' bathroom and someone had put kitty litter, and it was like, it was official. It was like, there's kitty litter on the floor and this is school sanctioned. This wasn't someone's prank. And she flipped her lid and got herself suspended out of the school. But she got suspended because she had a problem with that, not the fairy that the faculty were humoring. Her mum went and challenged the principal, and the principal's like, "Oh, look, there's nothing I can do. It's you have to talk to the district." Goes to the district, person over 3 schools, and like, "Oh, there's nothing we can do. It's higher up." These people, these are grown adults. These are, in both cases, those were men. These are men, and they're allowing kids to indulge these kinds of psychotic fantasies, and the effect that has on all the other kids. And what's happening, I think, in part, no one thing explains it all, but I think there's a percentage of young people that are sitting there going, where the fuck are the adults? How come I'm having to be the adult here and I'm able to see what's real and what's not? But every time I go to one of the adults, they're entertaining all this nonsense. And this, I think, is why they're not just going back 1 generation or 2 generations. They're going back to their grandparents' era. And this is the level of analog and logging off that's happening, but also the resurgence in the Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church and much more conservative denominations within Christendom. Amongst my nieces and nephews, I can tell you, they are getting married and having kids much younger than me and my brothers did. Right. There is a very clear generational difference. And for generation after generation, each new generation was getting married later and having their kids later. That trend is reversing as we speak. There is an enormous generational shift. And this is no small aberration in the data. They fundamentally see the world differently, and they see it differently because they see the failure of how we've brought them up, basically.
I want to touch on this by Red Pill here. Be careful with that observation. Gen Z are also voting for more socialism due to being left out of the society, like buying houses and stuff. Absolutely. I mean, we've hammered these guys 100 times on the podcast. There has definitely been this sector of the youth who are becoming really enamored with socialism. But I will give a caveat here. There are enough people in this country now who have had a taste of socialism, who have fled either Eastern European states or, China and places like that. There's enough people to be able to combat this on a more community-based level. I mean, your Indian migrants aren't going to be voting for socialism. Your Chinese migrants aren't. Some might, right?
In a minority.
Your Gen Z that are into this and your millennials, they are the same people who would be voting Greens, right? These are people who have been told that they have mental health problems. They've been told that they're special. They've been told that they're victims. And there's a certain sector of society that will always fall for that stuff, always. And a lot of this comes down to, I hate saying this, but some people just lost causes. Some people are just no amount of support, good homes, good family could have prevented them this. And, I'll give you another example. When there's an addict in the family, even though they came from a good home, they came from a middle-class home, parents love them, they become an addict. Unfortunately, some people do fall through the cracks. No amount of scaffolding could have prevented that, right? And I know a lot of bleeding hearts don't want to make peace with that. At the core of all of this, and I always try and bring it back to this, is that the left always have this utopic view. Like, if everyone did this, this would happen. It could be perfect.
It could work out for everybody.
That's what socialism sells them. It will be amazing because we'll make it amazing. But at the core of all of this, at the core of wokeism, at the core of trans stuff, at the core of socialism, is this expectation that should they be given the exact same circumstances, everyone would get in line and think the same way. Human nature, human behavior shows us that's not possible. We are ultimately corruptible. And you see this with people when they're put into certain situations. Like, it's just not possible to get everyone on the same page. And so, sure, we're going to have that handful of people that fall for socialism. I don't think they are ever going to get a stronghold here like they have in New York. New York's a different beast. Do you want to talk about New York quickly?
No, I want to come back to this comment because it's a great comment, but I want to make a really clear distinction here. So Gen Z are also voting for more socialism. The youngest generation has always been the most socialist. Socialism looks good to a kid. You know why? Because the family unit is supposed to be socialist. God's design for society was that families are socialist, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. I'm not telling 2-year-olds to get out there and get a job. No, they need a socialist environment in which to survive. Going from socialist to not socialist is a key part of growing up. So it's not unusual for the youngest generation to be the most socialist. They're still children, or they're emerging out of childhood. That's always been the way, and it will always be the way. But it's not historically been normal for them to do less drugs than their parents, to do less alcohol than their parents, to do less promiscuous sex, to get married younger, to have more kids, to be more focused on getting a trade. That's an aberration. In this case, in the case of the poll that we just showed you, to be more proud of Australia. That's not historically been true for the last 3 generations before this one. So there's enough things that are changing to say this is different now. And just because the socialist thing, you're correct. I'm not saying you're wrong, but that's always going to be true. And that is a feature of childhood. My 3 little kids are socialist to the core, right? They want fairness. They don't care about what reason or explanation I have. They don't care that I'm the one that earned the money and I'm the one paying for it. They want the share that's equal, that's at least as big as mine. They are socialist to the core. And that is the nature of children. And that is actually a good thing within a family. So I don't think we can begrudge them that. But we are seeing enough points of difference that I think we can safely say at this point, there is so much data out there on so many different data points. There is a shift on, and it's massive. I think this is every bit as big as the sexual revolution was in the 60s, and it's going in the other direction.
Yeah, look, I think there's an element of that, but I wanted to go over to New York because everyone's talking about Zohan Mandani, obviously, and them electing a socialist.
Is there anything new on that?
No, I mean, just he's come out, he's hired a whole bunch of random people, and I think a lot of people are stuck on his housing person, the woman who says that whites are the problem for housing and white ownership and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But New York's a different one because most people who are in New York aren't necessarily native to New York. A lot of the old school New Yorkers didn't vote for him. They voted for Cuomo. Yeah. The people who voted for Zohan are uni students, people who go to New York to get their big break, to get their life. Now, this is a choice. New York is painted as this cosmopolitan city where everything can come, all your dreams can come true. It's romanticized in Hollywood, and it also hosts a whole lot of the big universities are over that way. And so you've got people who are flocking there from other states to go and be part of this big thing to get their big break. And obviously it coalesces and they end up becoming, caught up in different groups, and then, the socialism thing and all that sort of stuff. But New York is also one of the most outrageously priced residential areas. It is obscene. It's a small city. It's incredibly hard to get housing there. And you go and have a look. Like, this is just a random thing to think about. You go watch any of those YouTube videos about New York housing and the way people live. They are living in squalor. They are living in effectively shoeboxes, and they're paying in excess of $1,500 a month. So this matters because it gives you a pretty bigger picture. These aren't people living in like a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom unit with like a little bit of a balcony like they are in inner city Melbourne. These are people who are living without windows. They're living in shoeboxes and, rat infestation. So in their mind and the way they see things, they're like, oh, this is squalor. This is not how we're meant to live. So in them, it's sort of like all encompassing because they're living in this weird part of the world that most people aren't. So when you present socialism to people like that, it makes sense because that's their reality. And then when you get them out of that and they're in, bigger areas, it becomes a lot harder to sell socialism. So New York's an anomaly. I don't think that's pretty indicative of how Gen Z will vote. And it's also the perfect place for socialism to take hold. Perfect. I can't wait to see what happens in the next 4 years.
So, Red Pill, we'll come back to the 3 hemispheres thing in just a second. I did see the comment earlier and I made a mental note of it, but we're getting towards the end of the show, so I'll have to get to all those things. But I wanted to come back to this from Patrick Van Roost. If the bill gets passed, what's to stop the government requesting Facebook to give them a list of all the people with community standards violations going back years and then using hate laws against them? This is the important bit that I said earlier. The actual hate speech part of this bill has been scrapped. So the bit of this bill that was most immediately dangerous is gone. We don't have to worry about that. The only thing that's dangerous in this bill in the short term Obviously, more government power is always dangerous. But the only thing that's dangerous in the short term to Australian citizens who aren't at risk of deportation is the hate groups side of things. And that could certainly be weaponized. That definitely could be weaponized, and it could be weaponized in some really egregious ways. But I think that's going to be much more cumbersome for them to weaponize, and they're not going to be able to target individuals in the same way that the hate speech side of it would have allowed them to do. So, Patrick, I think you can kind of park this particular fear for now. Obviously, it's still a backward step. Whatever he passes is still a backward step. We need to continue our momentum moving forward so that we can get a government that's actually going to abolish a bunch of this nonsense. But don't lose any sleep over that. That particular concern isn't oops. Sorry, I just did something on my computer. Isn't a concern at the moment. Now, we need to wrap up the show pretty soon. Red Pilled has asked twice and is pretty keen to have a bit of a chat about the three hemispheres thing. I'm happy to do that for literally 2 minutes, but was there anything else you wanted to cover before we wind up the show?
I don't think so.
All right. So the three hemispheres thing, essentially, there is an expectation that the world's going to kind of divide up into, sort of, you're going to have your America sphere. You're going to have, I can't even remember the exact dividing lines, sort of your Asian dominated by China. Then depending on who you talk to, it's either like a Russia, a Eurasian kind of sphere. But this division between Europe and America has a lot of people talking about the world breaking up into these three sort of areas where each one will have its superpower with hegemony over it. I just don't see that happening. The reality is America is still the only power that can project power. China cannot even project power, militarily speaking, to the shores of Australia, right? Yes, they could send a bomber, they could send a couple of ships, but they could not send the kind of force that America can send to the Middle East or off the coast of Venezuela, etc. We've gotten so comfortable with the gap between the capabilities of these militaries that we've actually lost sight of just how terrifying America could be and would be if a situation of total war broke out. I'm actually convinced that right now America is the solo superpower. Now, China is not to be trifled with. I'm not suggesting they are. And other powers have certainly regional hegemony in specific instances. But China cannot even take Taiwan without thinking very, very carefully first. And Taiwan's a couple of 100 kilometers off its coast. America has the ability to project more power into Taiwan than China does when it's right there off their coast. The idea that we're going to see some sort of a military hegemony over all of Asia held by China, I think is nonsense in my lifetime. Now, obviously, times change. I'm not saying this is forever, but I'm not, this theory that the world is going to divide up like this, I really don't think so. I think it's predicated largely on this belief that Trump is an isolationist, which is not correct. Trump is much more of a non-interventionist, not as much of a non-interventionist as I would like him to be, but he's more of a non-interventionist compared to, let's say, a Bush or even an Obama. And people are looking at that saying, oh, he's withdrawing from the world. No, look what he's doing. He's basically bullying the EU into increasing the size of its army. A lot of this bluster that's going on is actually him highlighting just how toothless the EU are. The entire EU, which has a GDP infinitely bigger than Russia's, could not stand up to Russia in an all-out conflict. At the moment, maybe they can because Russia has wasted so much of its resources in Ukraine. But honestly, in an all-out conflict, Europe would be given a run for its money by Russia, a decrepit, failed state running on 40-year-old military technology. What Trump is doing is saying, hey, guys, you all got fat and lazy off the security guarantees offered by the US. You're not spending the amount of GDP that you should on your own defense that you promised you would on your own defense under the NATO agreement. And he's essentially bullying the world into actually starting to stand up on its own 2 feet. I actually think this is a really good thing. I think that we're going to see global trade continue to flourish. I think that if anything, the risk of an all-out global war is lower under Trump than what it is under any other president in my lifetime. And this whole sort of three hemispheres theory, I think it's a flawed premise. That's my view.
There's some people in the comments angry about you for talking about Trump in a positive way. This is something I really want to do. I want to really deep dive into this and how easily people are baited into just collectively hating something. Trump derangement syndrome. G and I have been talking about this a lot. Just his name alone sends people into a rage. And I've put out some bait recently on socials just to see how easy it is to get people to rile up before they've even heard what I said. So I posted something before about, the Maduro thing, right? So, before people can even digest the Maduro thing, the fact that Trump's name's associated with it, they've already made up their mind. Same thing with Iran now. And I'm seeing this, and I see it in the comments, and I see it, elsewhere. The second Trump's name enters the chat, the entire conversation is co-opted. People cannot get past this man. And I think it's a fascinating thing. And I don't think it'll happen in yours and my lifetime where people study this to the degree that I believe it deserves to be studied. But Trump derangement syndrome, I'm not simping for him either. There's some things I like. There's some things I don't like. That's the way politics is. I don't understand this like diehard stand for or, you got to love him or hate him.
You're not allowed to be like, well, there's some things good, some things bad.
And why are people so invested in it? No other leader has co-opted people in this way. And, I hear people say, oh, he's Hitler, he's this. Point to the moment where he was Hitler. Show me what he has done that puts him even in the ballpark of a Hitler. They can't. Oh, but, he's this. What is that? What is this collectivism around Trump derangement syndrome? And I'm seeing it now with the Zionist thing. I'll give you an example. Last week on our Wednesday podcast, now you and I record that Wednesday morning, and we had a comment on there saying, why didn't you talk about this? They talked about it over here and rah, rah, rah. That had all happened after you and I had filmed the podcast. So we couldn't have foreseen that happening. And you and I said in that podcast, I said, I'm not across this, so bring me up to speed. And you said, I've only read this section, so I'll give you what I know so far. We gave you those pre-qualifiers. We told you exactly how we were. And yet, because we didn't get into line with whatever the current thing is in this person's mind, we were Zionist shills. No one mentioned the Jews. No one mentioned Zionists. No one mentioned any of that. But because we didn't behave the way they expected us to, that made us a shill. So I warn you guys in the comments, and you're probably going to ignore me, so whatever. When these things pop up, whether it's Trump or Israel or whatever, chill the fuck out. You are acting like the people on the left. It's the same thing. This TDS, this Zionist thing, you cannot have a conversation with these people unless you are in lockstep with what they want you to say. You and I get this all the time. We're shills for this. We're shills for that. We're not enough down the rabbit hole. Good old Lee Radford, who's in here trolling us again tonight. You guys cannot stand if we do not parrot back what you need us to say. You don't want to hear our opinion. You want us to say what you think so you feel validated. That's where we're all going wrong. And I'm not trying to sit here and say I have all the answers. I certainly fucking don't. I'm new to this political game. I've only been doing this for 5 years. Topher's been doing it for 16 years. I'm telling you how I see it, what I think about. That's it. There's no Mossad money. God knows I fucking wish that I'd get some of that cash every now and then. It's the second you mention Trump's name, people lose their mind. What is that? I'm trying to understand it.
So just as a follow-up comment from Red Pill, I'm just looking at the Trump movements. Everything points to war preparation in the next couple of years. Trump isn't silly. He's securing trade routes. 100%. What I'm saying is that the idea that we're going to fall under the hegemony of China, I think is nonsense. We'd be more likely to fall under the hegemony of Indonesia than we would China. Indonesia has more capacity to project power onto Australia's shores than what China do, simply due to proximity. And I'm not particularly worried about Indonesia, just to be clear. I'm just saying, as a comparison, China does not yet have the capacity to project power across blue water, not in a way that is meaningful. So is there going to be war? Very, very possibly. Very possibly. I think someone like Xi Jinping is not getting any younger. If he wants to take Taiwan in his lifetime, he's running out of options. He won't do it while Trump's president, but is he thinking that is he hoping there's going to be a Democrat snapback and he'll have his chance, in sort of 2030 or something? Maybe that might be what he's thinking. There could very well be war, but also understand how Trump operates. He starts everything out at the highest of high stakes. Chaos is his modus operandi. He talks about this in his books. He wants everyone else reacting to him. Look at what he's doing with Greenland. He does not intend to invade Greenland militarily, right? That's off the table. But he's bellicose, and he's saying these things that the tabloids pick up and the media pick up, and the EU commissariat are all running around like headless chooks. Trump's being, he's threatening war. No, he's getting you to be in chaos.
The media. He co-ops media. He gets the attention. He knows what he needs. And he says the most outlandish, bombastic thing to get people in a tailspin, knowing full well that when he actually negotiates and gets what he wants, that's what he wanted all the time. And it's the art of the deal. Anyone who's read his book knows. I've said this a
You know how he
1,000 times
operates.
in the podcast. He is so predictable. Trump is so simple to understand. And that's why I'm bewildered by Trump derangement syndrome. He's so easy to understand. I don't get it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, look, I think Trump's been a really good thing. Hate me if you want. I think Trump's been really good for the world. Has he been perfect? Far from it. But if you look at the situation we would be in from a free speech point of view, from a net zero point of view, from a globalism point of view, taking over the entire English-speaking world, imagine a world where what's-her-face had won. Gosh, I've forgotten the name already. The lady who ran against him at the last election. Kamala Harris. Imagine a world where Kamala Harris was the US president right now, and how different that would be. I think it's pretty hard to argue that Trump is bad.
Horrifying. That's
horrifying. I think it's pretty hard to argue that Trump's been a bad thing for the world when that was the alternative. And I'm not even making a lesser of two evils arguments here. Trump has been actively good in a lot of respects. He's getting rid of the EPA restrictions on CO2. He's killing the climate change fear factory at its very, very heart. He's getting out of the UN in some really meaningful and substantial ways. He has actually been a broker for peace around the world, not a starter of wars like what Obama was. Not wars, kinetic military actions, he liked to call them, because they didn't require congressional approval. He could just go and do them. Trump has been a really good president. I would go so far as to say that Trump has been the best president in my lifetime. And that's going to piss a lot of people off because he's not perfect and they can point to all kinds of things. So be it. You're entitled to your opinion too. Trump has been the best US president in my lifetime. Full stop.
And on that note, I hate to alarm you, but I have 7% left on my laptop because my charger is not currently with me. So we've got to wrap it up unless you want to continue without me.
No, look, we're 2 hours in. That's enough for one night. Guys, one more time. There are still tickets available. We haven't sold out on our very first night. So you do still have a moment to be able to get in. I'll just bring up the screen again here for those that missed it earlier. Our first birthday party is coming up. It was not a joke. It was not a myth. It's actually happening. And here it is. Sorry?
I said I always get there eventually.
Yep. No, we got there. And it's going to be a great night. The venue's fantastic. It is on the 21st of February. You can catch up with all your favorite oddies and all your least favorite ones as well. Tickets are $49. It includes entry and it includes all the canapes and finger food that'll be being passed around, and then drinks at bar prices. We will do an entire Oddcast show. Yes, the drinking game is going to be pretty dangerous for your liver on that night, so proceed with caution. But we're going to have a lot of fun. There's going to be a lot of interactivity with the audience. I'll be doing some stand-up comedy. We're going to do some giveaways, and we'll put our heads together and come up with some other fun stuff that we get to do while we have a live audience, because that'll be the first time we've ever had that. So 21st of February 2026, tickets are $49, and I will one more time drop the link for the tickets into the live chat, into the comments. This should show up on YouTube. So whatever YouTube channel you're watching this on, it'll show up. If you're on X and you're watching, you'll have to go to topherfield.com and follow your nose into the shop and then go looking for the tickets. You'll find them there. There are still some available. So we look forward to seeing you there. In other news, do you want to promote Kofi?
Someone appreciates my artwork. Thank you. I appreciate this.
Someone has good taste. Someone's angling for a free ticket. That's what that is.
Guys, if you'd like to support us, you can shout us a coffee on Ko-fi. We appreciate every single one of you. We couldn't do this without you. And as long as you're entertained, we'll be showing up twice a week, every week. I am going to be in Japan as of Thursday, but I will still be podcasting from Japan. That's how much I love you. I will interrupt my entire holiday plans to make sure I can jump on and talk to this bloke.
Look, I said I can do solo shows. I can hold my own for 3 hours without breathing, but apparently that wasn't good enough. She was afraid that too many people would unsubscribe.
I won't do that to you guys. I would never do that to you. Listen to me. I care about you. I will never, ever put you in that position, okay? Just let you know. I do care. But on that note, you can sign up as an OG Oddie if you want to support the show. It's $15 a month. And also, if you just want to, give us a donation, that's always lovely too. But most importantly, just to really reiterate this point, please share the show. If you find it beneficial, if you feel like we say something that's worth talking about, inviting people into the conversation, let them know. Yep.
And the OG Oddie thing will end at the first birthday party. The first birthday party is happening about 6 weeks.
At some point. We've been saying this.
No. And you wanted to end it a while ago, and I said, no, let's make it the first birthday party, and then the first birthday party got delayed. It will end at the first birthday party. So from that day forth, no one else will ever be an OG Oddie. All right. So, let's finish there, I guess.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you Wednesday, 7 p.m. for the next podcast.
Ciao.